Okay. Hello everyone. Sorry. Okay. I'll talk about this, but can you all turn on your videos if you can? I know not all of you can do so, but thanks. It's great to see you guys. Yeah. If the video is turned off, kind of feels like I'm talking to the wall. So, all right. Let me get started. So, by the way, please log into KLMS, and I've just uploaded the slide. So, can you please download? I'll give you a few minutes. Okay. Hopefully you have download. Oops. Oh, sorry. Please mute everyone. Please mute yourselves if you haven't done so. Good. Okay. Whoa. It's a big class. Okay. Can you all see my screen right now? Can you chat? Okay, great. Thanks for responding. Okay, let me start. All right, welcome to whatever it is. The title is too long. Introduction to Environment and Tools for Modern Software Development. Okay, it's a very long title. What you have to know is that this is a companion course to WE 209, right? You don't necessarily have to take 209 EE 209 for this class in order to take this class, but I'll talk about this in the later slide as well. But if you are planning on taking WE 209 later on, right? Then not in this semester, but in the future semester, then it will probably be a better idea to enroll this class at the semester when you are enrolling EE 209. That's probably the way to get most out of this class. Okay. Similarly, not similarly, on the other side, if you have already taken EE 209, you probably know most of this class, so it's probably not that helpful. Okay. All right. So this class is designed to help EE 209, because we were aware that a lot of students struggle with a lot of things in doing EE 209. So we wanted to make a helpful course that can kind of give you some technical skill sets that will help you out through your homeworks in EE 209. Okay, let's move on. All right, welcome to the course. Okay. So to start with, this class will be held remotely throughout the semester because of the COVID-19, of course, and it will be live on Zoom, just like today. Okay. This is for active discussions, of course, and lecture slide will be uploaded in KLMS just before class, like today. Okay, and so when class starts, you can immediately download before class. You can immediately download the slide. Okay, expect it to be on KLMS. One more thing is that we have two Zoom links. where I think it was probably posted on the KLMS. I'm not sure. We have two Zoom links. One is for myself, and the other is for another instructor, Professor Yun. Okay, so this class will be co-taught by Professor Yun and myself. Okay, this week I'm teaching, but in the 2 weeks from now, by the way, we don't have a class next week, of course, because of Chuseok, right? So 2 weeks from now, I think it was me or me again. So it's 3 weeks from now, you'll see Professor Yun. Okay. All right. So Professor Yun and myself will have separate Zoom links. So be sure to check the announcements. I think it's on the KLMS. If not, we will make an announcement of which link you should use on which week. Okay. All right. So don't try to, so if you're on the wrong Zoom link, you'll probably the class won't be there. So just be careful. Right. Some guidelines on using Zoom. I think most of you know this already. Please use Zoom client as opposed to web version, and please set your name in this format, which is student ID followed by your name. Okay, so that we know who you are. And turn the camera on. We want to match your name and appearance. Okay, and I want this class to be as interactive as possible, though it is on Zoom. Okay. And please mute yourself. I think by default, you guys are muted. But if accidentally, if you happen to turn it on, please turn it off. Mute yourself always, except when you have a question. Okay. When you do have a question during or after class, please unmute yourself and interrupt the speaker. So whenever you have a question, you're free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. Okay, it's fine. Though I've never seen anyone doing that in any of my courses until now on Zoom. Yeah, I think people do that in offline classes, but I think students are kind of more shy when they're using Zoom, so I don't think they interrupt me ever. But you are free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Okay, or I think a better way, or a way that students more prefer, is type your question on the Zoom chat. So I will be checking the chatting window all along. Okay. So if you have any questions, type in the chat, then I'll immediately answer your question. Okay, as soon as possible, right? Okay. Okay, so as I just described, there are two instructors. So this class is co-taught by Professor Yun and myself. Okay, roughly half and half. Okay, Professor Yun, if I may introduce him. So he is he's a professor in computer division, and where his research is on student security and hacking. Okay, so he's running a hacking lab. So he's doing a lot of interesting work, and he has very much knowledge on systems engineering. And this is me here. So also in the I'm also part of computer division, and I do research in wireless networking, communication, IoT, and mobile systems. Like, for example, your wearable devices and IoT devices and smartphones, tablets, and so on. Okay. All right. And this is a bunch of TAs we have. We actually have 11 TAs. So we are all here to help you out. We are ready to serve you. So Please give us a lot of questions. Okay, we'll try to answer them as soon as possible, and we'll try to make this class as interactive as possible. Okay, so we are here to help you out. Okay, and these are resources and contexts. So since we have 11 TAs, right? We have a mailing list to reach out to all of the TAs, not only TAs but also the instructors, meaning all the TAs and 2 instructors, right? So when you are interacting with any one of us, please use this mailing, okay? And do not use TA's individual emails, okay? That's why I did not write it here, okay? Because we have a lot of TAs, right? And a lot of students, right? So if you start emailing individual TAs, then there has a very high chance that we might have a communication issue between the TAs and the instructor, okay? So to avoid that, always use this mailing, okay? And in that case, you don't have to worry about which TA is managing which part of the class, okay? All right. You don't even have to worry about whether you should ask me or Professor Yun, right? Of course, if this personal information that you have and includes personal information, or well, you can send personal information to TAs, but if this is something that you only want me or Professor Yun to know, then of course you can send me or Professor Yun an individual email, right? And KLMS is for course announcements, assignment submission, and lecture slides. Just like the slide, lecture slides will be uploaded on KLMS, and assignment submission system on KLMS will be used. We all know that, right? And course announcements like Zoom links will be made on KLMS as well, right? Oops. And one important thing is we have homework every week. Okay. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't be surprised. Okay. We have 11 homeworks. I can see you guys are a bit stressed already. Don't worry too much. Okay. So that's meant to be easy. This is something that you can just do. It's not something that you have to worry about per se. This is something that you can just do and you're done. And another good news is that the homeworks that you'll be doing in this course is actually something that you'll naturally do when you're doing your homework for EE209. Okay, so what that means is that in order to do, because EE209 homeworks are much more challenging, right? So in order for you to do EE209 homework, then you actually have to do whatever that is given by the this class assignment, right? So what that means is that the assignments in this course is not an extra work, right? It's not an extra work at all. It is actually just there to give you help. In other words, it's there to let you to move step by step. Okay, that was how this class is designed. Okay, all right. Hopefully it also works. It will work out that way for all the homeworks. Okay. At least that's what we'll try to do. Okay. Okay. I think that will hold for most of the assignments. And so and the homeworks are meant to be easy. All right. So don't worry. And the homework will be given. It will not be separately announced, but it will be always on the last part of this lecture slide. So on the last part of this slide, we have the first homework. Okay. All right. So always check the lecture slide. Last slide. Of course, I'll talk about it in the lecture. But even if we don't have a time to talk about it, always check it's always there. So always check the last page, the last part of the slide for homework. Okay. And the homeworks are due within a week. Okay. Meaning until the next class. Okay. All right. Campus Wire. I think most of you guys are in EE209, so you probably have used this before. We have Campus Wire for a separate Campus Wire website for this class. So this class does not share the Campus Wire website with EE209. Okay, it has a separate website. This is the link, and this is just like EE209. It's for Q&A and discussions so that we can all share. Okay. I think hopefully most of you guys are already invited. So you guys are all registered, signed up to this website. But if you, in case you're not invited, okay, use this link and use this code to sign up, okay, as soon as possible. Hopefully, ideally, right after this course. Okay. All right, and always search for questions before asking, because questions tend to be duplicated. Okay, many people have same questions. Okay, so please search to save your time and to save everyone's time as well. Okay? Everyone else's time as well, right? Including yours. Okay, so and the answers can be given by instructors, TAs, and most importantly, peers. That means you, right? Okay. Please help your peers out. Meaning that please comment on the Campus Wire whenever you can. Okay. To make this course as interactive as possible. Okay. And quick announcements from instruction TA may be made here, so please keep an eye on it. So what this means is that big announcements will be, of course, made on KLMS, right? But there might be some things very very quick and very small ones, right? So it won't necessarily be an announcement, but something may be beneficial if you know, right? We cannot make announcements for everything, right? So please keep an eye on this Campus Wire, right? So that you get all the information. Okay. Any questions up until here? I guess not. Of course, you can stay and ask later after class. Okay. All right. Let's move on. So course overview. I think I talked about this mostly. Is designed for students taking 209. If you have already taken it, you probably don't need to take this class. If you've not taken it, you plan to take it in the future, then take it when we encourage taking it when you're taking EE209. Okay, it's a letter grade with a hands-on practice 77%, meaning we have 11 homeworks, so means 11% for each homework, right? And the final exam is 23%, nothing else. And there's no midterm exam, and final is take home. Okay, so this class is not about load, right? It's about giving you help. So it's designed to be helpful, but very easy, right? We expect all of you to pass if you have regularly attend the classes and follow the content. And it's really hard to fail in this class. Okay, so just follow what's done, then and we try to be lenient in grading. So again, this class is meant to be easy and meant to be helpful. Okay, it's not meant to give you extra burden. And this is the course schedule, tentative course schedule. Okay, right? Okay, so the goal of this class is getting familiar with the Linux programming environment. Okay, and feel comfortable, in other words, like feel comfortable with tools for EE209 programming assignments. Okay, just get you two started and get you to familiarize yourselves. So there's a question about attendance score. No, there's no attendance score. Okay. All right. So these are the tools that we'll be talking about throughout this course. All right. There's no textbook. Just slide. Slide is enough. And you might want to Google time to time, but there is some helpful books, right? Like these books that you can download. Okay. All right. So in this class, we'll talk about setting the in this lecture. Today's lecture, we'll talk about setting up the programming environment, meaning the Linux and Bash, and using a text editor and executing a simple program and building a program. So what we're trying to talk about today, okay, is something that you must do, you must know for your homework 0 in EE209. Okay, it's probably the first step when you start your assignment 0 in EE209. Okay, so what we'll be doing is that how do we connect to the server? I know that a lot of students ask me this question. Okay, and now I finally get to answer this question. Okay, how do we, for example, log into the server, right? And where do we start coding? Where do we start typing our code, right? What is the file that we'll be writing on, right? And how do we upload the server, upload the file to the server? How do we download from the server? How do we compile? How do we make a program? How do we run the program, right? Those are the basic things. Those basic things are the things that we'll be learning through this class. Okay. All right. So we will be throughout the course of this course and 209, we'll be using Linux, right? Linux is a free open source operating system, and we use Ubuntu distribution specifically. Yeah, there are different types of distribution of Linux. There are different versions of Linux where we are using Ubuntu, which is one of the very popular distribution of Linux. Okay. So how we will be using Linux? Well, option 1 is visiting Hedong Lounge offline, but that's not encouraged at this time. Where option 2 is more encouraged, using remote access to Hedong Lounge, where we are remotely accessing EELab G and EELab G12 and EELab G13. If you're in my class in EE209, I'm not sure what happened in Professor Yun's class, but if you're in my class, which is section A of EE209, I've accidentally took this out. I just said EELab. I think I just said EELab 12 to 13. I didn't realize that this is wrong, right? I realized that you have to put G there. Okay. I don't know why they did that, but all right. Anyway, so option 3 is installing Ubuntu your own PC. Okay. All right, and you can compile on your own PC. Installing Ubuntu your own PC can be a dual booting along with your Windows, or you can use virtual machines like VMware, or you can use if you're using Windows 10, you can use Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL. Okay. But always remember that we'll be running when grading. We will be running your program on these servers. Okay. So even if you program on your local machine, you have to always make sure that you run it on these server machines. Okay. All right. Hedong Lounge, don't visit, but this is just information, right? But one thing you have to know here is this, right? Okay, so if you're taking 209 or even for 485, your account is already set up. I'll talk more about this in the later slide. If it's not set up, you have to email us, or you have to email the staff at the Hedong Lounge, which is in this website. Okay. All right. You have to either let us know, or you have to either let us know, or you can directly let the staff know. Okay. There's a question about is there an option for Mac users? Well, if you're using VMware, I think it should be fine. If you're using virtual machine, I think it should be fine, right? I'm not sure. I've never tried it though. I think it should be fine. Of course, we'll, as we will talk about in the next following slide. Well, you can use a text editor anywhere, right? Well, you will use something called VS Code, and that runs on a Mac. So, but compiling is a different story. So, Mac OS. I think, I'm not sure if you have tried. I've never tried it myself. If the virtual machine actually works well on the Linux virtual machine on the Mac OS works well. Okay. Well, Mac OS, it's built on Linux, so you can actually run GCC. But okay, here's what I'll do. I'll check with Professor Yun as well, right? We need to have some consistency there. So I'll check with him, and we'll post. We'll make a posting on the. We'll make an announcement of it. Okay. I don't want to give you a wrong answer at this point. All right. Okay, let's move on. So, okay. So in order to use Linux, you should be in order to use Linux, you should be able to. You should familiarize yourself with something called CLI, or command line interface. Okay. Most of you guys are probably used to using your Windows, right? GUI, graphics user interface, right? Where you just click the icon and stuff like that. But Linux, it has GUI, but mostly it uses the command line interface, right? It's sometimes called terminal, right? And if you execute the terminal, then you'll see something called. If you execute a terminal, that gives you a command line interface, meaning instead of just if you want to execute a program, instead of just double clicking it, you have to type the name of the program. Okay, those are called command line interface. All right, instead of GUI interface. All right. Okay. And that's one of the things that you will learn, and you'll get used to after taking this course and EE 209. All right. Okay. So Linux is installed on all those machines where you will be using these two, right? Okay. And these two are dedicated to these two classes. What that means is that this enables us to have less interference from other courses, right? Means that those machines are meant to be more reliable, right? Because it's just for you guys, right? And also these machines will be on 24 hours, so you should be able to log in at any time of the day or 24/7. Okay, if you cannot log in, send us an email or staff or Hedong Lounge staff an email. Okay. All right. Other machines will be turned off at night, or it can be turned off at any point. So there's no guarantee that you can always log in. So always try to use these two machines. Okay. Your account is already created, and ID is student ID is your student ID, and password is this followed by your student ID. Okay, so if your ID is this, then your password is this. Right? And if you're taking, I think this should be applied to most of you guys. If you're taking E209 as well, your ID may have been created under this password. Okay. So if this doesn't work, try this. Okay. It really depends on which was created first, right? So if you're taking both 485 and 209, I'm not sure which one was created, right? So try both. Okay. If both don't work, the ID probably doesn't exist. So send us an email. All right. So we are actually getting a lot of questions about how you guys connect to the server, right? So connecting to a server has always been a lot of issue. Has always been a step where you struggle a lot for this class. Okay, so start early, and ideally try to connect as soon as possible after this class. Okay, don't start at the don't delay until the last moment. Okay. Okay. How do you remotely access Hedong Lounge machines? Is you can use a different tool, different command line prompts, command line services, where one of them is SSH. It's a short for secure shell. Okay. And you might you might be wondering what shell is, right? You can understand what secure is. It's something secure, okay? Right? You can understand that, but it's hard to understand what shell is, right? Okay. Shell is a command line interpreter. So what shell does is if you input some command on the command line prompt, command line interface, and you press enter, and what shell does is that it understands, it interprets what you have wrote. Okay, and that is what shell does. Okay, okay. That's a widely used terminology in computing, so get used to it. Okay. All right. You can invoke a shell on a by using SSH. You can invoke a shell on a machine and securely access it over the network. Okay. Right. So why is it secure? Because network communication on SSH is encrypted and authenticated. Okay. Because it's authenticated, you always have to input your ID and password, right? And we'll talk about that later. And that's how you log into server using SSH, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. Okay. For Windows users, what you can do is you can, if your computer is Windows, then you can use a different program for SSH. Most popular program is Booty, right? It's a free program, a very light program. where we have a slide on this in the following slide. We have a slide on this in a few slides. Okay. So anyway, this is a very lightweight program application that you run on the Windows. You can freely use a download for free. Okay. And for Mac OS and Linux, just use the terminal. Okay, Mac has its terminal. Again, Mac is built on Linux. So you can use command line prompts that Linux supports. So you can use SSH on a Mac, on Linux, on a terminal. Okay. All right. So search an open terminal program, like this, right? Like you did here. Same for Mac. Look for terminal. Then type SSH, then student ID at the URL. Okay, you should not put this, right? This is just for representation. Okay. Put SSH student ID at this domain, okay, where X can be 12 or 13. Of course, you don't have to put this. You can just say, you can also do SSH EE lab G12 at KAIST.ac.kr. This also works. In case if you do this, the difference is that you have to if you have to put in your ID after you connect. If you do this, you can immediately put password. You can skip the part where you put in the ID. Okay, so both works. All right, so PuTTY is this. So it looks like this. Okay? Very small program, and the icon is this. It looks very old, right? Icon looks pretty old. It is very, very old, right? Right. It was there when I was a grad student, so it's I know how. I have no idea how old this is. Maybe older than some of you guys. Okay. It's a single file, very small software. You don't even have to install it, if I remember correctly. It's an open, just putty.exe. And you just, so this is what you get if you open putty.exe executable. Then you just put this, okay, on the host name. Okay, and you have to select SSH here. I think SSH is selected by default. Okay. Okay. And 22 is there by default if you select SSH. Okay. So all you have to do is put this and click open. Of course, just like we have learned here, you can also put instead of this, you can also put student ID, ID at this, right? Sorry for the terrible handwriting. You can also put ID at this, right? Here. If you don't want to input ID every time. Okay. Okay. Type in if you press open, you'll be asked to input password and ID and a password. And before that, if you're connecting for the first time, you have to. There's some security question. Then you just press yes. All right. Okay. And this.
Sorry, may I ask?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
In order to have remote access, should we connect it to the KAIST VPN?
If you're outside the campus, let me talk about it. I'll talk about it in the following slides. Okay, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay. I think you're the first student who actually interrupted me as the question. Good job. Okay. Anyway, so this actually, if you test it, if you ever test us, this actually gives you a very small, poor looking window. Okay. So if you want to use more fancy application, then you might want to use this one. Okay, I've never used it, but you don't need to use this, of course. PuTTY will be enough for this class and EE209. Okay. Anyway, okay, this is KAIST VPN here. So if you're outside the KAIST campus, then you have to use something called VPN. Okay. Okay. So what's the definition of outside and inside, right? Right. So if you are in the dormitory, you're inside KAIST campus, of course, right? So if you are anywhere inside KAIST campus, then you don't have to do this. You don't need KVPN. Okay? So all you have to do is this. Okay. However, if you're outside the campus, if you're in Seoul, or if you're anywhere in outside the campus, right? If you're in Dunsan, right? You're still outside the campus, so you need to use the VPN. Okay? How to use a VPN is explained well on this website, but let me just go through it very briefly, just to give you a high-level idea of what will happen. Okay, log in with your KAIST account. Okay? You just go to this website and log into KAIST web account. Then it will guide you through multiple instructions. Okay, one is for authentication. Okay. Okay. Authentication meaning ID and password and things like that. Then where it actually does multi-factor authentication. Okay. Why is it called multi-factor? Is because you already put your KAIST account here, right? But it has another authentication on top of it. That is why it's called multi-factor. Okay, you log in with a KAIST account, and then there's another authentication, which can be done at your own choice. You can use Google OTP, some app called AirQ, or I think it also has SMS. Okay, different options that you just choose one from all those options that they provide. Okay, and this website actually gives you a very nice instruction on how to set each of the application. Okay, just follow that. After you do that, it will ask you for a secure connection. Okay, this is about encrypting your information. Right. In order to do so, you have to install something called Purse Secure. This is also well guided in this website, so just follow that. All right, then you'll be good. After you do this, and then you run PuTTY. Okay. So what that means is that after you do VPN, KVPN, then you are virtually inside the campus. Okay. So now you can imagine, you can think of yourself as you're in the KAIST campus, within the KAIST campus. Therefore, you can just run PuTTY and you'll be able to connect. All right. Okay. After your first successful login, this will be you'll be prompted with a bash shell. Okay, and this is the command line prompt, right? Command line interface, right? And specifically is a bash shell. Okay, bash shell. We've talked about what shell is, right? It's just the interpreter of a command line interface, right? Where one of the shell, there are different types of shells, where bash shell is just one type that we'll be using. Okay. Okay. And now you can enter a command. Well, and one of the first command that you should be running is change the password, right? By inputting past WD, then you are able to change your password, right? Just put password, pass PWD, and then you just input previous password and a new password twice, and you're done. Okay, so this is the first thing you have to do after login. Okay, if you're working remotely, it can be unstable sometimes, so please understand that. Could be turned off, or there might be some network issues. Okay, and of course we will try to keep it always on, but sometimes it might be off due to power failure, a lot of issues, right? If this ever happens, just let us know, right? If the communication is so slow, if it's not responding, let us know, right? Of course, you have to be patient, but if it doesn't work at all, you should let us know, okay? Okay. And lab machines could be unavailable, and so we strongly encourage to keep your important code and files on your own machine. Don't reliable on the server machines. Don't rely on the server machines, okay? Okay. Our recommendation is work on your local machine and test, and when you're done, test it on your server and submit it. How do we move files between machines? So what is our suggested guideline? Is that you program on your computer, right? And then you upload on the server and test it there. And if it runs well there, you submit on KLMS. That's our suggestion, right? And in order to do so, you should be able to upload the file, your file, local file, to the server, right? In order to test it there. And that's what we'll be learning about in the next slide. What you basically do is you use a command line prompt called SCP. Okay. In your Windows machine, you'll be running SCP to either download the server file or upload the server file. Okay. Someone's not muted. Please mute yourself. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So let's talk about downloading first. Let's talk about uploading first. Okay. So suppose you have done your coding and you want to upload that file to you want to upload your C program file to the server. What do? You use SCP and you put the file name, including the path. If the file is not in the current path, right? You have to put the file path as well, and the file name, and the username at localhost, the host URL, and some optional path within this your directory. Okay, so this is example SCP and your assignment file name. Okay, and your ID and the URL followed by optional path. So you don't necessarily have to have this, but what this indicates is that when you log in, if you log in, for some of you, if you have logged in already, then you probably aware that when you log in, you are in a folder or directory of your default of your ID, right? So there is a default directory under your ID. Okay. So when you log in, you're always within that directory. So if you don't put this file will be copied onto that directory, the default directory. But if you don't want to do that, you want to put it somewhere else, then you put this here. Okay. Then this file will be placed where it will be placed one. Oops. Sorry. I went over the page 1.c. Okay. Does this make sense? Okay. All right, this is a long description when I say it in words, but if you just do it once, then you immediately understand. Okay. So if you want to download, it's the other way around. Okay. Try it yourself. So if you want to copy many files, you can use something like asterisk. Asterisk.c means any name followed by .c extension. Okay. Then this will upload all the files that corresponds to this pattern, right? Any .c file. By the way, SCP use the same protocol as SSH. By the way, this is the file to copy, right? So CP is copy, S is secure. Okay. Okay. So it uses security. It is also secure as SSH. So download and download is secure, meaning that it is encrypted and authenticated. All right. Okay. So you might want to have this question of, okay, you're using a window. Okay. So if you're using a Windows machine, right? Where is this SCP, right? Right? Where can you execute this SCP, right? Well, if you're using a Windows machine, we'll talk about that later on. Okay? If you're using a Mac or Linux, then you have the terminal, right? You can always use that on your local machine. But if you're Windows, you don't have a bash shell on Windows, so there's no way for you to use SCP there. So you need some different software. Okay, we'll talk about that. But it's not complicated at all. Okay. All right. Okay. But our encouragement is to use local Windows Linux machine. Okay. All right. Keep that in mind. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's talk about. Okay. Let's talk about the Linux. Let's talk about the relationship between the Linux or OS and the shell. So what is OS? What is short? It's short for operating system, right? Where Linux is just one type, right? We have a Mac, we have Windows, and so on, right? Even like Android, those are all OS. Okay, OS is a system software that helps applications run by providing services that require interacting with the hardware and protecting from other malicious programs and etc. So if there is hardware there, OS actually gives an interface between the hardware and the application. Okay, and kernel, you might probably have heard about this before, where you probably don't know the definition. Kernel is a core program that manages resources of a computer system. So it's basically a core part of OS. Okay. And system function here. System function is the part that requests a privileged service to the kernel. Okay. Okay. So let me repeat. Maybe that's confusing. So this is the OS, right? Where kernel or Linux, right? We're talking about Linux here, right? What is a kernel? Kernel is a core program that manages resources of a computer system. So kernel, okay, is the part that manages that is in between, that directly manages the hardware, as you can see here, right? A system function here is a layer that requests a privileged service to the kernel. So you might not understand what privileged is, right? Here, what privileged means, one way for you to understand privileged is hardware. So suppose there is a function. Suppose your application wants to write a file. Okay? You want to create a file. And that's directly related to the hardware, right? You're writing onto the hard disk. Or before that, memory, right? You write to the memory and then the hard disk, right? So it directly manipulates the hardware, right? Those things those are privileged, privileged requests, privileged function. And those are called system functions, okay? Okay, those system functions are here. And of course, again, system functions needs hardware, system functions directly manipulates hardware, right? Therefore, it has to go through the kernel, which directly manages the hardware, right? You see the point? Okay. All right. The shell is right here, right? It's like any other application where it's a specific application that interprets command line prompt and invokes software. Okay, so suppose if you execute some program on the shell, what that shell does, it interprets your command and then runs the corresponding software. Okay, that's what shell does. Okay, there are different shells and we're using bash. For example, this is one command of the shell, right? Ls, it shows the list of the file. Okay. Okay, there are more commands here, right? There are different commands. Try it out yourself. Okay, where you should be careful with the remove command because there's no undo. Once you remove it, you're done. So be careful when you're using remove. Okay, so let's move on to how to write a program. Okay, there are text program. C code is nothing but just a text, right? So you can actually use Notepad to program. Just write a program in Notepad and save it as some file .c and you're done, right? It is a C program. However, this is ugly. It does not have any convenient functionalities. Okay. So we typically don't use this. And there are different popular text editors, much more fancier, much more convenient, where Emacs, Vim, VS Code, and Sublime, and blah, blah, blah. And why do we use this instead of Notepad? It has useful functionalities like syntax highlighting, right? Different syntax, different words are in different colors, for instance, right? We are able to jump around between codes, right? And it has it does the indentation for you, meaning these are indentations, right? You don't write. So since most of you guys are taking EE209, we've talked about how important it is to write a readable code, right? One way to write a readable code is to do a nice formatting, right? So one of the things we do is indenting, right? This space here. Instead of putting this here, we put a space, large space, right, between large spaces so that it's easier to read. Okay, and these are called indenting, and that is done automatically done in these software, but not in this notepad, right? And we can easily do debugging, compiling, and so on and so forth, and there's hotkeys as well. Okay? We actually have a separate lecture on these editors, I think like 3 weeks from now. Okay, so we'll talk more about that, but we will briefly talk about one of the text editor that we'll be using throughout this course. So our choice among many is Visual Studio Code. Is arguably probably the most popular text editor now, right? Is a lightweight but powerful source code editor and is one of the most popular ones. It runs, these are like, these are the benefits of VS Code. Why do we use VS Code? Okay, many people use it, good, right? Means there are a lot of resources, right, in the web. That's good. And also it runs on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Okay, so even if you're using Mac, you can still use it. Okay. All right. And is a GUI, so it's easy to start. Then command line prompt, right? It's easier than just typing in everything, right? And it has a rich ecosystem. And so it has a built-in support for JavaScript and so on and so forth, but you don't have to know this at this point. Okay, just know that there are a lot of plugins to make this VS Code even better, right? There are a lot of plugin software to help you out, and we'll call Visual Studio Code as VS Code. A lot of people call it VS Code. Okay, how do you install it? So we will be using VS Code throughout the course, right? Okay. Please install it. How do you install it? Just download and install, right? Nothing, right? And it supports all the platforms, and just launch it. Yeah. And how do you make your first file in the VS Code? Well, you just click file and click new file and save, right? And this is you create a new file and type this in. There's a new file here, so you just click this, and you're able to create a new file and just type this in and save it, and you're done. Okay. And this file will be on the directory you selected. Okay. Okay. Suppose if you're using Windows, right? You cannot use SCH directly, SCP directly. Okay. Of course, we strongly encourage you to install Linux on your Windows system. Okay. Okay. But if you insist using Windows, okay, then due to some reason I don't know, but please, for sake of your safety in the future homeworks in this class as well as 209, please install Linux. Okay. All right. Okay. So how do you run SCP on Windows? Because Windows does not have Bash. Okay, this actually has Bash inside. Okay, VS Code actually has it inside. So you just click terminal here, and the new terminal, and you see this terminal here, and you just type SCP command here. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to a little bit depth into building a C program. So how do you write a C program? So what is a C program? Okay. C program actually, this is an example, hello world, that we also saw in EE209, right? It has a source code, and the C language contains preprocessor directive as well, right? We'll talk about what preprocessor is as we move on, okay? And how do we execute it on the server is this. Okay? You save it as hello.c, you upload this to server, and then you do this on server. There's one question about, do we have to use VS Code essentially? Well, short answer, no, but we strongly encourage it, because in the future slides and lectures, we'll optimize our lectures and slides with on VS Code. Okay. But short answer, no, strictly no, but we strongly encourage. Okay. All right. So this script, this GCC 209 is a script, is a custom built script for our class. Okay. And it goes like this. GCC is just a typical C compiler for Linux, where GCC 209 has different options. Okay. So this option is to optimize for our class. Okay. We'll talk about those options later on, not today. Okay. So how to make executable file, right? So you run this on the server. So what happens in the server? Okay. So given a hello.c, there's something called C preprocessor, as we talked about here. So what is a preprocessor? I think I have a slide on it later on. Okay, I have a slide on it. What preprocessor does, it actually just replaces some text with some other text. Okay, pre-processing, it just does a pre-processing. It changes some text into some other text to be compiled. Okay, we'll have an example. It's better to look at it through an example. Bear with me. So it goes through a C preprocessor, and it spits out hello.e and hello.i. And then hello.i goes to a C compiler, which gives us the assembly code. And assembly code. Oops. And then it goes through C assembler and gives us hello.o, which is in the machine code. Means zeros and ones. Okay. And linker, let's talk about linker later on, goes to linker and gives us the executable file. And all this process, shortcut for this is this. If you do this, run this, we internally go through all this. And if you want to go through this step by step, this is the prompt commands that you can do. If you want to try it yourself, please go ahead. Okay. And so let's look at each step by step. Okay. What C preprocessor does is, again, replacing some text with some other text. Okay. What it does is it contains the declaration of printf function. Okay. So it has a printf function, but it is not, what printf is not there. So what is a printf? It's not written here, right? It's not written in this code. So what is a printf? We don't know, right? So we do something, preprocessor does something called declaration. Okay, meaning that it just puts its function name format at the very top of the code, just to tell the compiler that this function has this format. Okay, but it still misses the definition. Okay, another thing that preprocessor does is that it removes the comments, as you can see here, right? Hello, look at this comment here. Oops. This is a comment, as we discussed in WE209, right? So this is not useful for the machine. So this is just erased by the preprocessor. Okay. Okay. So we now have this, right? Now let's move on. And compiler, what compiler does is that it changes the code, the C code, into assembly code. Okay. It's still, so assembly code is specific to that computer architecture, meaning it's specific to your Intel core. It's specific to the ARM core, okay? It's specific to different cores, okay? That you should learn in computer architecture course. And, but it's still missing printf function, okay? And assembler, it changes assembly code to a machine code, binary code. Okay. Now it's unreadable by human. It's readable here at least, but it's unreadable by human. So it's so it's called machine code. Okay. Still missing printf function. Where printf function definition is actually within the some library. Okay. Which is actually defined by, oops. So where is printf defined? It's still unknown, right? Right? It's still unknown. It's the definition is actually is here. This forwards to a library called lib8. That's what's the name of it? What? libc.a, right? This actually points to libc.a, library called libc.a, which includes the definition of printf. So what linker does here, given the machine code, what linker does is that it looks at the library libc.a and extracts the definition of printf and copy it into your code and then make an executable. Okay. All right. Right. So that's it. So what is the difference between GCC and GCC 209? Okay, I talked about it already. GCC 209 is a special script made for 209. Okay, and where it actually is just GCC with a lot of options. Okay. 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 So it's designed to help you out. It warns unused variables, so let you know that okay, you define this variable, but you're not using it, so you should maybe remove it. Okay, and warns variable without initialization and so on. Okay. Okay. Setting this script on your own machine, we'll talk about that later on. Okay. All right. So this is a homework for lecture 1. So what do you do? So given all this information, you should be able to do this homework. Okay. In your local machine, make a C code called hello.c that prints hello world. Oops. Okay. Using VS Code. Okay. Of course, you don't have to use VS Code if you're using some other editor. That's fine. Okay. In VS Code, SSH into one of the lab machines and upload the code with SCP. Okay, now your C file is on the server. You compile it with GCC 209 and name the executable as hello. Okay. If it does not compile, you have to go back to the first stage and change your code, fix your code, right? Of course, this is not an efficient way at all. We'll learn about more efficient ways to do this in the future lectures, okay? Okay. So this is to do, and you should do this. The deadline is next week, okay? Okay, it's Chuseok, but still deadline is still there at this point, because this is you have to be able to do this in order to do your assignment 0 for EE209. That's why the due date is at the Chuseok. Okay. Okay, we're done. Thanks for listening, and you're free to go. You're free to stay. Okay. Right. Thank you. There's one question. Oh, there are two questions. Okay. Is the recorded lecture going to be uploaded in KLMS? We'll upload it somewhere, probably KLMS, but I have to discuss with Professor Yoon to confirm. Okay, but we will upload. Okay, thanks for asking. Okay, another question. I have a question about 2. Okay. In assignment for lecture 1, shouldn't we use SCP to upload the source code first and then use SSH to access to? Where's 2? Oh, 2 here. Okay. Should we use SSH to upload the source code first and then use SSH to? Oh, that's true. Sorry for that. Maybe I need to fix it. Oh, that's true. That's true. SSH lab machines and upload. Yeah, that's true. Sorry about that. Yeah, you need to copy first and then log in to compile. That's true. Okay.
Professor?
Yeah. Can you wait a little bit?
Okay.
There are other questions, so let me answer that first. Okay. There's one question. If I use virtual machine, can I access to the files on my Windows and move them into VM Linux? Because VS Code is on my Windows. I do not want to download it to okay, that's a okay. So your question is, can we access, one second. Virtual machine, how can I access to the files on my Windows and move them into Linux? Because VS Code is on Windows. No. That's weird. So are you there, Ihan?
Yeah, I'm here.
So you're using virtual machine. So that's the question, right? That's the question,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
for you, in order to answer your question, there are VS Code for Linux as well, right?
Yeah.
So on the VM Linux, you run VS Code on VM Linux, not on Windows.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Like, should I download the VS Code into my VM Linux system? OS?
Yeah, if you install VM Linux, that's virtually actually a Linux. So within that Linux, you can install VS Code.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Does it make sense? There are tons of different ways to do this actually. But I'm assuming that you don't know any of it. Okay. And I'm trying to guide you through the most easiest way, which I think is the easiest way. Okay. So who was the questioner?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I didn't understand about how to use GCC. So, I need to write this GCC 209 like in terminal on Linux.
Yes, on Linux. So GCC 209 is not on your Linux. It's not on your local machine. It's on the server. So what you have to do is you have to make the code, right?
Yeah.
And then upload into upload into the server onto the server and SSH into that server, right?
Yeah.
And now you're on the server, right?
Yeah.
So and the file is on the server as well, right?
Yes.
Then you can use GCC 209 there to compile your C file there.
Can I use this on VS Code terminal? Similarly?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
You can also use PuTTY. So, okay, you can. Yeah, you can use PuTTY. Yeah, you can use both PuTTY and SCP, but VS Code, I think VS Code is easier. And that's why I put it as a VS Code in the homework.
Okay.
But again, there are tons of different ways to do this, right?
Yeah.
Almost infinite number of ways to do this. So you know, I cannot give you all the answers, but if you want to do it another way, you know, if you make sense out of it, it should be fine.
Okay.
If you can make a sense out of it. Okay, but please try to. I'm assuming that you have no experience, so please try to follow the instruction then. Okay?
Oh yes, thank
That
you,
should be
Professor.
I'm trying to help you out. I'm trying to give you the easiest way to do this. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
교수님 혹시 한글로 질문해도 되나요?
네네네네. Sorry for so if you ask in Korean, I'll paraphrase it and answer in English. Is that fine? Is that fair? Can I answer in English? So I have to answer in English. So you can ask in Korean. I'll paraphrase it in English. Go ahead.
그 VS 코드 관련된 질문인데
네.
이거 리눅스로 다운로드하라고 해주셨잖아요. 네, 이게 헷갈리는 게 뭐냐면 네, VS 코드 사이트 들어가니까 뭐 윈도우즈용이 있고 리눅스용이 있는데 리눅스용 확장자가 .deb 이런 식으로 돼 있어서 이거를 뭐 윈도우즈에서 실행할 수 있는 파일이 아닌 것 같은데 이걸 리눅스용을 다운받으라는 건 어떤 뜻인지 정확히 지금 제가
So the question is, did I tell you? I don't remember telling you that you should download the Linux version of the VS Code. So if you are, so our suggestion, right, is to install Linux on your local machine, right?
네.
If you have installed it, then you should install VS Code for Linux. Okay. So if you install the if you install the Ubuntu on your computer,
네.
then you can install a Linux version of VS Code. Does that make sense?
그 WSL 이야기하신 걸 이제 실행을 했는데 그냥 뭐 프롬프트라고 해야 되나 그런 식으로 이제 입력하는 창이 뜨더라고요. 혹시 이게 맞나요?
Honestly speaking, I've never used WSL. But so I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. If you I think TAs probably have used it. At least one of the TAs have used it. Maybe you can send the email or post it on. Maybe better way is to post it on the Plasm, and we'll try to get back to you.
네, 감사합니다.
Yeah, but since I'm not the expert on WSL, well, if you ask me, I would install a real Linux. But because at least for I've heard one of the other student told me WSL, at least for Mac, is unstable. But I'm not sure for Windows is as stable. Yeah, so we have given WSL as one of the options. So I think it should be stable, right? That was that was the comment given by other professors as well. So I'm assuming that is reliable, but I personally don't have information. Yeah. So one thing you need to understand, all of you guys need to understand, is that there are infinite ways of system combinations. So there's no way for me to know everything. Okay. So all you have to do, so you actually have to try it a lot of times. Okay. Most secure way definitely is actually installing the real Linux on your machine, of course, right? Most reliable way should be that. But I'm not sure WSL is as reliable. But it can never be more reliable, right? Right? Then it can never be more reliable than installing a real Linux, right? Okay.
교수님,
Yeah, you have to install it at your own risk. Okay. Yeah.
저 질문 한국어로 해도 될까요?
Yeah. Go ahead.
그 앞에서 설명해 주셨던 그 ubuntu라는 그 뭐라 해야지? 그게 리눅스인 건가요? 그
Okay. So the
Yeah.
question is, so is that your question? Let me answer that question first. So the question is Ubuntu a Linux? Okay. Yes, I can answer that easily. I think I can answer that clearly. Linux, Ubuntu. Okay. Oops. The Linux, Ubuntu is a part of Linux. It's one type of Linux, one version of Linux. There are different types of Linux, like Fedora and stuff like that. Ubuntu, I think, is most widely used these days. In the past, it wasn't true, but now I think it's most widely used. So so there are a little bit differences between the versions of Linux. So we will be using Ubuntu. I think if you go into the Hedong Lounge machines website, then you'll be able to see the version of which version of the Linux that we are actually using. We're using the stable version of the Linux of the Ubuntu. Okay, Ubuntu releases. Okay, there are different release versions of Ubuntu as well within Ubuntu. And the version that we were using, I don't remember what that I don't have that number at the top of my head, but if you're interested, you can look into the Hedong Lounge website, then they should have it. Okay, so Ubuntu is a Linux. Linux is not always an Ubuntu.
그러니까 그 우분투를 다운 받고 그 뒤에서는 이제 그 VS 코드 설명해 주셨는데 그러면 VS 코드는 그냥 윈도우스에 그냥 다운 받고 그 업로드하는 방식을 그냥 VS 코드 자체에서 그 모든 걸 다 수행할 수 있는 건가요?
Okay, so let me make this clear. So okay, the question is, I think the confusion comes from the VS Code being compatible to all Linux, Mac, and Windows, and we are encouraging you to install Linux, right? So let me clarify that. Let me try again. Okay, so we encourage you to install Linux on your local machine. Okay. So suppose you have installed Linux on your local machine. Then you install a Linux version of a VS Code. Okay. In that case, SCP and Bash, Bash functions like SCP and SSH can run both on VS Code or on your terminal. Okay. Does that make sense?
네, 감사합니다.
질문 하나 드려도 될까요?
Yeah, go ahead.
제가 금요일 오전 수업이 겹쳐가지고 수업을 드랍을 해야 될 것 같은데 영상이나 이런 자료들을 캠퍼스 와이어나 다른 곳에 KLS 말고 다른 곳에 올려주실 수 있는지 궁금해서.
There is actually a slide of the you can download slide older slides, lecture slides that you can download from the EE website, EE 209 website. So you might want to download that.
그러면 그 영상들은 KLMS 말고 다른 곳에
So
올려주실
the video is we're not allowing auditing for this course.
아,
So I think it's kind of against the policy.
네, 알겠습니다.
I think if you look
감사합니다.
at the slide, yeah. And if you're taking W209 this semester?
네, 수업 듣습니다.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
빠르게 질문 하나 드려도
so
될까요?
yeah.
In this
That's a weird situation there. Okay. Yeah, we strongly suggest taking this course, but if you cannot, well, you can download it and look at the slides. And if you have any questions, yeah, I think you can you can ask. You can send me an email instead of sending email to all the TAs. Okay. Okay.
교수님.
Yeah, go ahead.
들리시나요?
네.
Yeah. In this
You can speak in Korean.
yeah, last slide, assignment for lecture 1.
Yep.
Yeah, you said we should write the C code in our local machine.
Yes. Not run. Write your code in local machine.
Can't we write the C code in our VS Code while connecting remote server?
That's true, but that's not something that we taught already. So I told you there are 100 different ways to do this.
Yes.
More than 100 ways to do this, where I'm trying to give you a way that only uses what we've already learned. There are much more efficient way than doing this, right?
Oh, okay, I see.
Do you see the point? Do you see the point? Yeah. So you can actually connect the VS Code to the server file, right? And then just edit there, but we haven't learned that. So yeah, so I'm just giving you a most easiest way to do this.
Then should I download another software for write C code file?
No, why? So you can just use a VS Code and write a code there. What's the problem?
Without connecting remote server, right?
I'm not sure what your definition of connecting there. So, but do you want me to re-explain this a little bit? So what this is actually doing is you write a code on a local machine, you upload it into the machine, right, using SCP. You can either do it on a VS Code or either on Linux, of course. But if you're using Windows, then Windows does not have a bash to run the SCP or SSH, right? Of course, you can use PuTTY, but using PuTTY is a little bit more trickier than at least than VS Code.
Yeah. As I know,
So you don't
I'm not
have to
sure.
use VS Code. You can, if you're using Linux or Mac, then you can use SSH and SCP on a Mac or Linux.
Yeah, I see. But as I know, if I use VS Code, I can write the zip file directly in the in that folder. So
in the server?
yeah. So
Yeah, that's true. So you can always, you don't even have to use VS Code. You can just do SSH and write your C code on the server directly,
yeah,
right? Using a text editor, right? But
yeah.
we have not learned
Mm-hmm.
how to use text editor,
Ah,
right? So I cannot assume that people know that. So if you know how to use like VI, or if you know how to use Emacs, then you can always do this, right? You don't have to use VS Code, but you know, our suggestion is use this. I have to make this homework such that it uses only the knowledge that we know, right? That I have taught.
yeah, right.
So is that understandable?
Okay, I will try. Yeah.
Okay. Always start early, and if you have any questions, just post on the Classroom, not Classroom, sorry, Campus Wire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
And there's another question on the chat I did not answer. Should the homework submission be compiled into a PDF file that contains all JPG snapshots, or should we submit each image directly? I think both are fine, but I'm not sure if you can submit each file. I'm not sure if you can submit many JPG files, or if you have to zip it. But anyway, doesn't matter. How do you submit? Okay. If you make it in one PDF file, thank you. It will be easier job for us. But if not, that's fine. Okay. Any other questions?
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
One student pointed out that from the instruction of assignment, so the order of the SCP and SSH
Yeah,
was
it's the other way
changed.
around. Yeah.
But then, so what I'm confusing with lecture slide page 30.
Page 30. Okay. Yes, here.
So this, according to this slide, we should first type SSH, then use SCP. So what is the correct order?
Oh, okay. Okay. That's a good point. Actually, you can use this order as well. Sorry. So you can also use, both works. You can SSH. 1 minute. Okay, let me make it more simple. Okay, let's just stick to doing SCP first. Okay. So we do SCP here, and we copy the file to the server. Does that make sense? Now the file is on the server, right? So you're running VS Code on your local machine, right? And then using SCP, this is my local machine, right? Right?
Yes.
This directory is my local machine, right? And we use SCP here to upload a file in this directory from your local machine to the server, right? Then now the hello.c is now within the server, right? Right?
Yes.
Now you log into this machine, then you'll find the file there, right? Within the, now you're in the server, right?
Yes.
There you do GCC 209. That makes sense?
Then one more question.
Yeah.
Then before we do the command SSH and SCP, should we log into the server via PuTTY, or is it just enough to use VS Code only?
VS Code is fine. Yeah. So what you're saying is after SCP, when you do SSH, right?
yes,
You can use
yes.
PuTTY or this as well, right? Well, I don't see a reason why you need to go back to PuTTY when you can just use this, right? Well, even if you use PuTTY, it will not, deduct your point. You'll be fine. But I don't see a reason why you would like to do that. It's just
Okay,
extra work, right?
I'll try that out later. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.